it's Alice, and welcome to another video. I got to thinking about the 10 Commandments last week from an article that I had came across months back. Can you tell I'm getting ready to head back to seminary? But it sparked my curiosity once again. And when I was connecting with Spirit, asking what we should talk about this week, I kept getting drawn back to the 10 Commandments. So, Spirit asks, and I do. They never let me down. So today we're not going to talk about that particular article, but we are going to cover it in part 2. Everybody, no matter what doctrine or modality, has heard of the 10 Commandments. But would you be surprised if I told you that, like most things, there is more hidden under the surface here? So today, we're going to take a little dive down into the rabbit hole and talk about some of the lesser known truths of the 10 Commandments. I'm just going to put a disclaimer in here. Everything presented in this video is theory and speculation. I just bring the research in hopes that it will inspire another to question and look below the surface, to find your own spiritual truths and what resonates with you. In the end, it's about opening eyes, bringing forth things that are hidden in plain sight, and to have a little fun. The commandments are mentioned in at least 2 different books within the Bible, Exodus and Deuteronomy, and partially in Leviticus, but we're not really going to talk about this partial set today. According to the book of Exodus, in the Bible, the 10 Commandments are rules for life given to us by God to Moses on Mount Sinai. Although in the book of Deuteronomy, it talks about being Mount Horeb, but really it's often considered to be the same place, just with different names. These rules were written on stone tablets and are important for Judaism and Christianity. However, there are other modalities that also uses versions of the commandments. And again, this is going to be something that we're going to talk about in part 2. These rules are also called decalogues. Coming from the ancient Greek language, and it's translated simply as 10 statements. The name Decalogue first occurs in the Septuagint, which is the Greek version of the Hebrew Bible. The commandments were received after the Exodus from Egypt, during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses. There are several different texts that talk about the commandments, however, most of them are in the Bible. So here's where it's going to get weird. And an always question what you're taught type of moment. What if I told you that there are really 2 versions of the 10 Commandments that were given at Mount Sinai, and that Moses went to the mount not once, not twice, but 3 times? Or the fact that most scholars argue that the tablets in the Bible, called the 10 Commandments, may not actually be the original 10 Commandments, but also hold many things that we're never even told about. This brings up a lot of questions for me and my inquisitive mind. One being, why were they never taught about this, or that the second set even exists? At least I was never told about it, and I went to a Catholic school and grew up in a Baptist church. I had enough of the Christian doctrine bashed into my brain. Never even heard about this. This is primarily and historically recorded in the book of Exodus, but then again later mentioned a second time in Deuteronomy. Unknown to many people is the fact that Moses went up to the mount at least 3 times. Likewise, Moses also came down 3 times, and therefore 3 times bringing laws and commandments from God. In Exodus 19, Moses goes up to the mountain to converse with God. There, God reveals to Moses things about himself, as well as certain teachings and laws. In the last verse of Exodus 19 says, "So Moses went down to the people and told them." Exodus 20 starts out by giving a list of commandments, as dictated by Moses. This list in Exodus 20, 1 through 17 is what most people know as the 10 Commandments, received on the 2 stone tablets. Yet in Exodus, the list is not yet reported as being written on stone, but spoken verbally. Although in Deuteronomy, it appears to already have been recorded on the stone. And here we are with two different accounts of the same story, and I would just question which one is the right account. But that's just me. Now this is key here. After a short intermission where the people showed fear of the Lord, Moses continues talking to God and continues to add more of the commandments and laws to this first verbal list that was not recorded on the stone tablets. So does this now mean that we are really supposed to have actually 20 commandments, but we're only being taught 10? Talk about picking and choosing. Interestingly enough, many Bibles have added a title to this section called the 10 Commandments. However, the Bible itself does not ever call this set of laws by that name. And many scholars do argue that there is another set that is actually called the 10 Commandments, stated in Exodus 34:28. The first set of verbal laws given by God, starting with what we know as the 10 Commandments, finally ends in Exodus 23, after talking about slavery and Sabbath. Then, for the very first time, in Exodus 24:12, God promises to give Israel commandments that are written on tablets of stone. So Moses proceeds up the mountain again for the second time. There was a very long conversation where God gave him specifications about building the tabernacle and the holy objects and so on and so forth. And during this time, as Moses is getting this revelation, the Israelites camped at the bottom of the mount, create and worship the golden calf. Then Moses turned and went down from the mountain with the 2 tablets. Exodus 32:15. And upon seeing the idol worship of people, Moses loses his shit, throws the tablets, and breaks them at the foot of the mountain. Thus meaning, the actual laws written on the first set of tablets are lost. So there brings about another question. Were the commandments changed at this point from the original verbal version to the second written version? I don't know. In Exodus 33, God rejects the Israelites and refuses to be their God. Moses convinces God to love his people, and God finally agrees. Then Moses, once again for the third time, treks up the mount, being told by God to chisel out 2 stones of tablets like the first ones. And I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. And that's Exodus 34:1. Calling the second set of laws the first tablets implies there were no tablets prior. It also implies that the first set of laws, which we know as our 10 Commandments, weren't even written on tablets yet. On the mountain, God retells Moses the words that were on the first broken set of tablets. These 10 laws in Exodus 34 appear to be the only commandments written on tablet. At this point, both the first version that was broken and the second version that was rewritten. And they seem to be different from the 10 laws in Exodus 20 that were given verbally. At the end of this list of the 10 laws in Exodus 34:27 through 28, the text itself classifies them as the 10 Commandments. God said, "Write these words, for in accordance with these words, I have made a covenant with you and with Israel." So he was there with the Lord for 40 days and 40 nights. Neither he ate bread nor drank water, and he wrote upon the tablets the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. This is the only place in the Bible where the actual phrase, the 10 Commandments, is used in context and close proximity with a list of 10 Commandments. Now, we all know the original set, but there is a comparison of the two very different from each other. The second set of the commandments, they are found in Exodus 34:10 through 26. And I'm just going to paraphrase here, and there'll be an insert so you guys can see them next to each other. No covenant with the inhabitants of the land. Destroy all pagan places. Destroy all pagan worship places. No idolatry. Why can't I speak? Idolatry. Yeah, that word where you oh hell. It just left. It just left. Oh, you know that word where you like worship idols? Okay. Keep the feast of the unleavened bread. Firstborn males belong to God. Keep the Sabbath on the 7th day, even in plowing and harvest. Men appear thrice a year before God. No leavened sacrifice or leaving the Passover till morning. Bring first fruits to the house of the Lord. Don't boil a young goat in its mother's milk. As you can see, these are very, very, very different from the ones that we're taught. The only overlapping commandments are no idolatry. It's back again. I can't speak that word. Don't worship the false idols, and keeping the Sabbath. So that leaves us with the question, which is correct. There's a few theories out there as to explain the reason of the change. And I say theory because none of this is backed up with actual physical evidence to support it, other than scholars and philosophers saying that's how it is. One of those theories is the Decalogue theory. The phrase 10 Commandments is only found in the Old Testament 3 different times, but it is found only once in proximity to one of the 2 separate Decalogues. Now remember, the Decalogues is referring to the 10 statements. These 2 Decalogues, which is the most popular and the set that we are taught, the verbal set according to the text itself, and the ritual Decalogue, mostly unknown and sometimes disputed. The recorded set that was on the actual tablets themselves per the text, and the ones that have the mention of the 10 Commandments within a few spaces of them. The first of the 3 times is Exodus 34:28. That contains the phrase, the 10 Commandments is used in the Bible, is in the verse following the ritual Decalogue. And the second 2 times is found in the book of Deuteronomy, which is Deuteronomy 4:13 and Deuteronomy 10:4. However, both times in Deuteronomy, there is no mention as to which set of Decalogues it actually is referring to. It simply states that the 10 Commandments were given and does nothing to say anything further. The only time the phrase the 10 Commandments is written in the Bible near one of the 2 Decalogues is in Exodus 34:28 at the end of the ritual Decalogue. Some scholars have argued that the biblical text in Exodus 34:28 identifies a different list as the 10 Commandments than that of Exodus 20:11 through 27. Since this passage does not prohibit murder, adultery, theft, etc., but instead deals with the proper worship of God, some scholars call it the ritual Decalogue, and rephrase the 10 Commandments of the traditional understanding as the ethical Decalogue. So the first verbal set would be the ethical Decalogue, whereas the second set that was written on the tablets would actually be the ones listed as the ritual Decalogues. Now, my personal takeaway from this, and if we look at the story metaphysically, the possible reason why Moses went 3 times is the verbal set of commandments is a more representation of a human level thinking and understanding, which is why the verbal set deals more in moral codes and laws for living. It states in Exodus 34:1, God told Moses to chisel out 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and I, God, will write on them the words that were on the first tablets, which you broke. Stating that God would write the tablets, not Moses. So therefore the second set would have a higher level of understanding and consciousness to it, and allude to Moses writing the first verbal set and not necessarily channeled from God. Now, let me clear this up for you, because I know some people are having some questions. No, the hand of God did not come down and write on a tablet word for word. Moses was used as a conduit, as a medium to get the spiritual information and write it down. If you look metaphysically into what mountain or mount means, it's to raise yourself to a spiritually higher vibration. And each time that you do that, your vibration will change, and so does your understanding. So what it's trying to say here, what I'm trying to say here is that each time Moses went to that mount, that higher state of understanding, his personal understanding changed, and it went from a human level understanding into a more spiritual high level understanding. And therefore, what was channeled from God through Moses onto the actual tablets would have been different than what was channeled the first time around. That was on a more level, human level thinking. I hope this makes sense to you guys. Okay, so we're okay. Okay, so it's just a thought, and we're gonna explore this a little bit more in part 2. And you'll understand why when I get part 2 filmed. That one's going to be interesting. That one threw me for a loop. You want to talk about illusion shattering? That one was illusion shattering. Now, please just understand that this is my personal opinion and thoughts on the subject, and in no way is absolute truth. So please don't come for me, because I know this information could tend to piss a lot of people off. And just don't get your panties in a twist about it, just because you may not agree. Our opinions and thoughts are what makes us all unique and individual, and something that I try to celebrate in all people. Unfortunately, there are so many questions that are still spinning, and I just can't answer them. Like all things, the only thing I can do is bring forth the information and inspire one to question and seek their own spiritual truths. But there is another theory on the commandments and Moses, and what sparked the initial dive down this rabbit hole of the 10 Commandments. And that is definitely worth talking about, and may shed a little more light on the situation. But we're going to save this for another day, and we're going to cover it in part 2. So I just hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I thank you for coming and hanging out with me. I hope this has inspired you maybe to question things a little bit more and look under that surface. Just remember that this is all theory and speculation. I just do the research and bring it to you with my questions. I am never one to tell anybody what to believe. I always leave it up to that person and your own discernment. So I hope you guys all have a happy, safe, and wonderful week. And as always, never stop questioning, never stop seeking, and never stop growing. I'll see you guys next week.